Hi, welcome back to my channel. My name is Felicia. I am a knitter, crocheter, and overall fiber enthusiast living in Washington, D.C. And this is my little corner of the internet where I share all of my fun fiber goodness. And so I just want to thank you for taking time out of your day to listen to me talk about yarn and knitting and something that I just love and love to share. So this is my second time filming this episode. There was a little bit of a technical difficulty, but what that means is that I think I worked out all of the kinks, and hopefully this will not be a long drawn out episode because I've said all the things already and I'm tired. And I'm on a break from sort of in between some meetings. So instead of eating lunch, I am refilming this episode. So hopefully it won't take too long. So before I get started, I am wearing the Ranunculus top by Midori Hirose. I knit this in the Spectrum, I think it's Spectrum Silk from Purl Soho. It's 100% silk. And this is the colorway lilac, something lilac flower, lilac petal, might just be lilac. I will link the yarn and the pattern below. If you want to hear about my experience knitting this particular top, I will link to the episode of the podcast where I talked about it. But I love this top. I love this color. It's a beautiful, beautiful spring day in DC. And I don't know, I felt like a flower. I feel like the sun is coming out and, you know, the seasonal depression is fading away. There's more hours of sunlight. It's warmer. And so I just felt, I don't know, bright and floral. So I wore my Ranunculus today. So I will link to all the information you need below about this particular top. So I have two really exciting finished objects to show. I have talked at great length about one of them, but I'm so excited about it. And I previewed the other one on the last episode. So I'm gonna show them to you. My first finished object is my Lunea shawl by Natasha Hornby of Moonstruck Knits. I have so many thoughts about this pattern, so I'm gonna try to get them all out without being all over the place. One, love this pattern. Okay, so I knitted in the recommended yarn in the pattern, which I will have linked below because I don't remember the name of the yarn. It is a Norwegian yarn, and it is very tactile. I prefer the term tactile to rustic. I feel like tactile just describes what these yarns feel like in my hands better. I feel like it describes the yarn better than rustic. But it's definitely a very, very tactile yarn. I knitted in the colors recommended. So this gray color, this light gray color is the main color. Then there's a white and a blue. I ordered the recommended amount of yarn and I have a ton of yarn left over. I have a skein of the white. I have a skein and a bit of the gray. And I have like a little nugget of the blue. So you definitely, I appreciate when patterns have you order more yarn than you need. But this was like way more than I think I needed. But I will figure out what to do with the scraps for this. But yeah, so I knitted on the recommended needle size, which I think was a 3.75. I saw on Ravelry where people gave the advice to knit the mosaic color work in a smaller size needle. So I went down a needle size to do the mosaic color work, and I felt like that worked really, really well. I only went down a size on this panel though. On this part, you're not matching it up in the same way. So I didn't do that. I knitted on the recommended needle size. The back of this is so pretty. And okay, let me show you this first. So this is the back. It's so pretty. I'm newly obsessed with mosaic color work. I've never done mosaic knitting, and I think if you want to try mosaic, that this is a really good pattern to do it. The pattern writer does a really, really good job of describing what you're doing with mosaic knitting so that you can understand it as you sort of work through it. You are essentially working one color at a time, knitting with the color that the pattern tells you to, and slipping stitches that need to be in the other contrast color. So it is a form of stranded color work, but you are still only working one color at a time, and you do end up with floats on the back. But I think unlike color work, I mean, I guess you could have floats that are too loose, theoretically. I mean, I'm sorry, too tight, theoretically. But I just found that I didn't find myself worrying about float tension as much as I would have if it was a traditional 2-strand color work. And I think that's just because of the way that the floats work. Sorry for people who are like weird about people touching their eyes. So, I was gonna say something else. Yeah. In terms of the construction, you knit this part of it first, this sort of panel first. You increase to the middle, and then you start working decreases, and then you pick up along the border, pick up all of these stitches, and then work down. It took me about a month to knit this. I'd have to go back and look. I know I cast it on at the very, very end of January. It took me about a month, and it was like I could not put it down, especially when I got to the mosaic parts. The textured part, the star stitch, was a little rough on my hands because you're doing like an increase on the purl side, and I'm a continental knitter, so purling is already a little tenuous for me, and so doing like increases on the purl side was not the most fun. But once I got through the star stitch pattern and I was just doing the mosaic, it flew off my needles. The advice that I would give for working this, and I give this advice whenever you're working color work, repeats, anything like that, stitch markers are your friend. So I just used stitch markers to block off the repeats, and that made it so that if for some reason I did mess up, which happened a couple of times, I only messed up within I think like a 15 stitch repeat, and I could gauge exactly where I messed up. So you didn't end up working across, because I think at one point you have like 400 stitches on your needle. Yeah, you work up to 477 stitches. So I couldn't imagine like getting all the way across this row and then realizing that I'm off by a stitch or off by 2 stitches. So it was, using the stitch markers made it so that if I messed up anywhere, I only ever messed up within, you know, a 15 or 20, I forgot the stitch repeat, but I only messed up within that stitch repeat, and that made it easier to just sort of work on and to memorize the pattern. Anything else? Oh, sorry, my mind. I blocked it with Tuft Woolens. I blocked it in 5th and 57th, which is my favorite Tuft Woolen scent. It smells like leather and old books and vanilla, and I love it. And that helped to soften it up quite a bit because it does have lanolin in it, the Tuft Woolen. So if you are gonna like knit with a more rustic yarn, then I recommend something that has just a little bit of lanolin in it. I find that helps to really soften it up. And I blocked it in warm water, not like piping hot, but like not tepid. So whatever is in between those is what I blocked it in, and pinned it out, and it turned out beautifully. So that's my first finished object. I talked about using this yarn as like a pop of color in the shawl, and when I put it in there, I didn't love it. it was giving Seattle Seahawks, and it looked like I was trying to incorporate a pop-up color. And I've been sort of reflecting on like color, the use of color, and style, and my personal style, and how I incorporate my hand knits into my style, how I style them. And I just didn't love it, right? And so I think that it is okay to not love something that you are working on and like rip it out. You know, it's just yarn, and these decisions don't have to be permanent. They don't have to be like end all be all. If you don't like it, rip it out. And that's how I felt about incorporating this color. Now, I do love this yarn, and I do actually really love this color. So I think I'm gonna actually turn this into a tank, a summertime tank, because this is 100% merino. And I think it would be really cute as like a bralette kind of situation, bralette tank situation. So you will see this yarn again. You will see it on this podcast again. But it just wasn't for this particular project. It wasn't giving me what I wanted. And I realized that what I was attracted to was sort of this color scheme done in this pattern. That being said, I would definitely make this again. I am not a person who often wants to make patterns more than once, because there's so many patterns out there. There's so much to knit. And so I'm rarely attracted to a pattern and say like, oh, I could make it again in this yarn or that. But I do think this would be really fun in like a neon. And I have seen a couple on Instagram and on Ravelry that are like bright, fun, pops of color, and I think they're really, really gorgeous. Now, am I actually gonna make this pattern again? Who knows, we'll see. But I think it would be really pretty, and I'm not against it. But I love this pattern, and there are a couple of other shawls by Natasha Hornby that I want to make. I think that she did a really, really great job of writing this pattern, and I would definitely knit another pattern of hers. Another tip, if you decide to knit the Lunea, is there's like a 14 or 15 row repeat, and you are told like to repeat repeat rows 1 through 14 X number of times. I wrote down for each row what my stitch count should be at the end of that row, because at some point when I first started the shawl, I got off on my stitch count. And you can fudge it kind of, but you need your stitch count to be right when you get to the mosaic sections. So I would write down what the stitch count is, because the pattern isn't going to lay it out for you like row by row, because you're like repeating the rows so many times. So I just had like a sticky note, and I wrote down rows 1 through 14 or 1 through 15, whatever it was, and then how many stitches I should have as I worked through each repeat, and then I would just double check and check them off. When you're working the initial increase and decrease section, I think you get up to maybe less than 100 stitches, so it's pretty easy to count it and check it, but I would definitely check it after each row so that you make sure that you are on track, especially because you don't want to be off when you get to the mosaic section. Yeah, so that's the Lunea shawl. My other finished object is my Foxthoughts pullover. I'm obsessed with this sweater, but she put me through it. And I'm gonna explain to you how we got here from the last episode, but this is for those who don't know. Oops. This is from the winter edition of Pom Pom. This is by Hiroko Payne, who is a brilliant designer, and I knit it in the recommended yarn. You will notice that this looks like this because this is the cover yoke kit, and I used Undergrowth, which is the recommended color. I will have all of these things linked below, the pattern, the yarn that I used. It's all La Bien Aimee, so it's La Bien Aimee Helix and Felix, which is, one of them is Falkland and Corrie, and one of them is Falkland and something else, but they're blended and they are non-superwash yarns. They are amazing. This blocked out beautifully, but I'm gonna go with me on a journey here while we talk about this sweater. So on the last episode, I had split for sleeves and I had gotten into the body a little bit. Before I go through the journey, I'm going to share the modifications that I made. So I did a folded over neckline, and I used a provisional cast on onto a spare needle to do that. I will link to the podcast episode where I talk about this particular modification. I will also link to the video, and that will have links to the video that I used to do the provisional cast on. But I do like doing my provisional cast on to a spare needle. It makes it a lot easier to pick up the stitches in the end, in my opinion. So I did that. I split for the sleeves earlier than the pattern calls for. It calls for you to split after the color work, but I did it in the middle of the color work. On my last episode, I talked about what method I used to cast on and pattern under the arm. And so what you ended up with is underneath, the pattern continues uninterrupted, and then on the sleeve underneath, where nobody is going to really be looking, you have like a partial repeat. I did start decreasing for the sleeves in the color work pattern in that sort of half motif. I cropped it and I did my own sort of shaping, which you can kind of see there. So after the last episode, I completely finished the body. I finished one sleeve. When I finished, the way that I finished the body the first go round is that I did a 1x1 like twisted rib. And then I was concerned about it having the stretch that I wanted, because I personally find that twisted rib is not as stretchy as regular rib. So what I did is I knitted the length that I wanted it to be, and then I folded it under. I knit a stockinette and then I folded it under, and so it gave it like a folded, it gave it a folded appearance, and then I stitched it to the inside of the sweater. I had also done like 3 rows of pretty rapid decreases back to back, and I did not back to back. I decreased the knit, then decreased the knit, then decreased the knit, and then did the ribbing. And I didn't love it, but I was like, maybe once I have the sleeves on, it will hang differently, because sweaters do hang differently with the weight of the sleeves on them to kind of pull the shoulders into place and like pull the sweater down. So I knit one sleeve, and I also did that sleeve with a twisted rib cuff, and I didn't love it. I'm not gonna say I hated it, that's very strong, but I did not love it. And so I kind of put the sweater in timeout for a while. And then I cast on my Lunea shawl, completely knit the Lunea shawl, and had not touched the sweater. Then I saw that Amy from Bien Aimee was going to be doing her worsted book tour at my local yarn shop. And I was like, okay, I want to wear this sweater to that event. The spirit of procrastination was still very strong in this one. I waited until the Sunday before to decide to fix all the things that I did not like about the sweater, and I wanted it to be perfect because I have a lot of Virgo energy. So I wanted it to be perfect. So I like chronicled this on my Instagram, and I wanted to have it done by Wednesday, the Wednesday before the Friday, so that I could completely wet block it, and I knew it would take 2 days to dry. And one of my followers on Instagram messaged me, several actually messaged me and was like, just steam block it. It had literally never occurred to me to just steam block the sweater. I had steam blocked the color work section once before to take a picture for Instagram, but it never crossed my mind to just steam block the sweater. I will say the yarn works up pretty evenly if you have a pretty even gauge. So it didn't need an aggressive block on the body part. I just kind of wanted to blend together the color work section, which is kind of, you know, double thick to the straight stockinette portion. Anyway, let's talk about what I did. So I ripped the body out and brought it back up and re-knit it, putting in decreases. I did a regular ribbing, regular 1x1 ribbing, and then I did a tubular bind off. On the sleeves, I had also done some weird rapid decrease, and it made it like difficult to put it on. And so I like ripped out just on the one sleeve, I ripped it back and just followed the decrease, and then didn't add any more decreases, and then just did the ribbing on the smaller needle, and that cinched it in the way that I wanted it to be cinched in anyway. So yeah, moral of the story is don't do weird decreases if you're not sure how it's gonna work. It might be too weird. But yeah, so I finished it, I styled it, I took pictures, well, not like official beauty, you know, Instagram worthy pictures, but I did get a picture with Amy in the sweater, and knitters and non-knitters were like, oh my gosh, I love your sweater. Knitters knew what it was, right? And non-knitters were just like, oh, that sweater is like really, really pretty. So I loved wearing this. I loved this pattern. I loved knitting it. I loved modifying it. I loved wearing it. I mean, and the yarn is so good. The yarn, like, it's so soft. It's so good. And because it's a non-superwash yarn on the inside, I was able to do all of my joins with spit splicing. So I will show you the inside. I had minimal ends to weave in because for the entirety of the chart, I just spit spliced. So there are my floats. And you see I have a couple of ends. These are woven in. They just need to be snipped down. So if not, I would have had like literally a million ends to weave in. And no. Like, no, thank you. So, I love this sweater. Here's a few things that I would have done differently. And these are things that don't really have anything to do with the pattern. More so just with decisions that I made. So I knit the size 4. And I think my gauge, I know that my gauge loosened up as I started knitting this sweater, because when I knit my gauge swatch, I was on track to get about a 43-inch finished bust circumference, and it was much closer to 45 inches, which is the size 4. Like, that was the size. So if I had it to do all over again, I think I would knit it a size smaller. I think I would have done the size 3, which I think was like a 41-inch bust. But I didn't want it to have like 0 ease or negative ease, and I was really worried about that. So it fits really great, and I love the way that it fits. I just wish that it had a little bit less ease. It's not oversized or baggy in any way, but it's just not as, it has more ease than what I would have wanted. But it fits into my personal style. I wear my clothes I don't wear a lot of like tight fitting clothing. And I kind of like a more like loose and relaxed look to a lot of my clothing anyway. So I appreciate the ease, and I just, having worn it and styled it, I think that I would have liked it to be just a little smaller. The other thing, I was going for a cropped sort of bubble style. I'm not describing that well. I wanted it to, you can see where I did the shaping, how it comes in. I wanted it to have that shape, right? And what I did is I just did decreases along the centers, along the side seams. And I decreased the knit a row, then decreased the knit a row. So I did them at a pretty rapid rate. What I wish now that I would have done is started that decreasing a little earlier. I didn't, because my original plan was to do the rapid decreasing and cinch it in at the bottom, I didn't think to start that process earlier. So that's just a modification I wish I would have made. I would have thought to make earlier in the pattern, but I think it still turned out really nicely because I wore it tucked in to some sort of mid to high rise denim, and had it kind of puffing out, and I think it looked really, really cute that way. And I will also be able to wear it sort of untucked and more casual than that. So it worked out fine. It's going to be just fine. But those are things that I would have done differently if I had thought about them. But otherwise, it's perfect. I love it. I'm so obsessed with it. It's a masterpiece. It's my masterpiece. It's a work of art. I'm so proud of it. I cannot wait to wear it more. I'm happy that it's spring, but I'm also sad because this is going to have to go away for a little bit until it cools down. But it is cherry blossom season in DC. They will be at peak bloom in a few days. So I'm going to take some pictures at the tidal basin with some of my hand knits. I think I'm going to take one in my Ranunculus, definitely going to take one in this, and definitely going to take one with this. So you will be seeing more glamour shots of this, and I love it. I'm obsessed with it. I am excited to, I don't know, like knit more color work and play with color more. There are some colors in that sweater that I want to knit like full garments out of. So I'm excited to start thinking about like new projects with the yarn. Oh, what I will say is this could be my tension, the size that I knit, etc. But I bought the recommended yarn for the body. The pattern recommends that you buy 4 skeins of Helix. I think it's Helix in the shade Undergrowth, or whatever your main body color shade is. I bought the recommended amount. I have a full skein plus half left over. I can show you. So I have this full skein and then this much of the 4th skein. So I used 2 and a bit skeins of the yarn. So I would recommend considering purchasing 3 skeins. It's tricky because gauge is so unique and personal, and you could knit at a different gauge than me and need that 4th skein, but you are holding the yarn double. I just pulled mine from the center and the outside of the cake and knit it that way. And on the body, only on the body, I did do helical knitting. I don't think it was really necessary because the yarn was so evenly dyed, and it's already got this sort of variegation to it because it's a purple and a plum and a brown and a green, and it's such a dynamic color that I don't think that the helical knitting really did a whole lot. But I did it anyway because I just wanted to hedge my bets on that and err on the side of caution when it came to the body of the sweater. So, but I still only used 2 and a bit skeins of yarn for a size 4. So I don't know if that's been like, if there's an errata and that's been sort of fixed in terms of yardage, but I would keep that in mind because those extra skeins are very expensive. And if you're not purchasing from a yarn store, then you might not be able to take it back. So that's just something to think about in terms of that particular pattern. But I love it, and I'm so proud of it. So I do have other works in progress. I can't really show them. One is a gift knit for my best friend, actually. And I don't know if she watches the podcast, but in case she does, I'm not going to show it because I want it to be a surprise. And my other test knit I've talked about a little bit before. My other work in progress is a test knit. I talked about it before. I'm knitting it in Kitsune by Bien Aimee and the Corrie worsted. It's stunning. I'm not able to show any pictures yet or any updates of it yet, so you'll have to stay tuned. Hopefully I'll be able to share more about it soon when the designer says that we can share. But when you see it, your mouth is going to drop. It is stunning. I'm obsessed with it, and I like can't put it down. Now that I have those 2 projects off my needles, I'm like fast and furious on this other project. So yeah, I actually posted about this on Instagram where I I talk a lot about being a monogamous knitter, especially on here. And I found myself not being monogamous and enjoying that process for a little while. So when I had those 2 projects on my needles, I had like 5 projects on my needles and that I was like regularly cycling through. I had my test knit, I had those 2 projects. I have a sock that I think I've shown a couple times on here, but I have a sock that I am working on like during meetings, and then I have these gift knits for my best friend. And so I have just been like enjoying the process of being able to cycle through these different projects, and it sort of like flew in the face of everything that I knew about being a monogamous knitter. And I don't know, it's just it caused me to reflect on like what all of that means and what that means for me as a maker, and you know, just sort of how I feel about working on multiple projects. And I think that that was just a season for me, the season of working on multiple projects. That was a season for me, and I was able to work on a lot of projects and have that variety when I was feeling kind of creatively stuck and needed to process what I was going to do with my Foxthoughts and these other things that I was working on. And my test knit it's an intense project, right? And so I needed the break of being able to work on something that wasn't a complicated project with a chart and that I have to follow multiple directions at the same time. Like I needed that sort of palette cleanser. And now that I have these projects off the needle, I want to like see a ton of progress on my other whips. And so I've sort of slowly been recoiling back into my monogamous knitter ways. And I think it just goes to show that even in crafting, you go through phases and ebbs and flows of creativity, of the methodology that you use, the way that you think about the projects that you're making. And so that was just like a place where I was for a couple of months where I really, really wanted to work on more than one thing at a time. And now I'm back to only wanting to work on, you know, 1 or 2 projects at a time. And so that has been a really interesting kind of journey that I went through. But I dipped my toe in having multiple whips, and now I'm back in the monogamy pool. And so, yeah, so that's also a reason why I don't have a ton of like new cast ons or anything like that. I will probably cast this yarn on, you know, shortly. The test knit in this dark colors, it's giving me like fall and autumn and winter. And I love that because that's when I'm going to wear this garment. I'm not going to be wearing a worsted weight garment in the summer in DC. So this like pop of color in this line weight yarn, I'm really excited to get that on my needles. But there's a place in the pattern for the test knit where I have said once I get to that spot, then I can swatch and cast on for a new project. I also really, really wanted to cast on my Magnolia Bloom sweater, but now it's getting warmer. I don't know that I want to be knitting with mohair in the summer. I may still try to cast it on and see. I'm still gonna make it, and I'm still gonna make it in that Treehouse Knits yarn because I think that's gonna be absolutely stunning. I'm not there. I'm not ready to like play with mohair right now. So no new cast-ons, no whips that I can share, but I was so excited to finish my Foxthoughts and my Lunea shawl. And so many of you have been messaging me on here and on Instagram. And, you know, I wanted to be able to share it and talk more in depth about the Foxthoughts because it's so good. It's so good. I highly recommend it. If it's in your price point, I would recommend knitting it in the recommended yarn. It is an investment, but it's also a work of art. And so I would recommend trying to get your hands on a kit. There's a new yoke kit that they recently released, and it's so pretty. It made me want to knit it all over again. Like it made me want to knit it as a cardigan. That's my brain like trying to justify buying another kit and knitting it as a cardigan. I don't know, maybe one day. I'm not inclined right now, but it's absolutely stunning. And so if you've been thinking about knitting it or intimidated by knitting it, you absolutely should not be. You should definitely like do it. Just cast it on. The pattern is so well written. The charts are so easy to read, and you will fly through the color work section. Now, I would not recommend it as a first color work pattern. This was my second time knitting color work. So do with that what you want. But I had at least a little bit of experience knitting color work before casting that on. But I don't think you need to be like a super experienced color work knitter in order to knit that sweater. Anyway, I'm rambling. I like bought yarn and done all of that stuff. I'm not going to get into all of that today, but I did pick up the Pom Pom Dreamscape issue that everybody is like going cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs over. It is as good. It's worth the hype. I've said this before. I think Pom Pom is really elevating, like they're really elevating their game. Like the patterns in the last few issues have been like consistently, I want to make every single thing that's in there. So there are a couple of patterns in here that I'm obsessed with, that I have started piecing together yarn for. So we'll see what happens. The one that I am the most excited about is this cardigan. It's stunning. And this right here, I want to knit the long version. I want to knit the long version, and I want to style it like over denim with, I don't know, just like style it over denim with like some boots, like some ankle booties. Yeah, but it's a scrappy project. You have like a main color, and then you're working stripes and scraps of mohair and other yarns. So that's a project that is just like kind of ruminating in my mind. I have no plans to cast either one of them on right now, but that doesn't mean that I won't cast them on at some point in the future. So yeah, I think that's everything. I hope that everybody is taking time to take care of themselves. There's a lot going on in the world. There's a lot going on in the US. I know that a majority of my subscribers live in the United States, and I have subscribers all over the world, but there's a lot going on. So take breaks as needed. You know, for me personally, knitting is part of my mental wellness and mental hygiene routine. And so taking the time to knit and to share my knitting and to see what other people are knitting really helps me to be able to process and deal with all of the things that are going on. So I hope that everybody within the sound of my voice is taking time to take care of themselves and take care of your mental health and mental well-being, as well as your physical health and physical well-being. You know, it's very easy to obsess over the things that are going on. It's very easy to doom scroll and to spend hours watching, you know, news coverage and inundate your mind with everything that's going on. But I implore you to take time to log off, to the extent that you're able to log off, turn off the news, take care of yourself, and think about other ways that you can be engaged with what's going on without having it be a 24/7 inundation of negative and terrifying thoughts and images. So that's what this is for me. That's what sharing this is for me. Yeah, so thank you again for your time. If you are so inclined, you can subscribe. You can give this video a thumbs up. It helps people find my videos. You can leave a comment. I'd love to hear from you what your plans are for the spring. If it's being outside more, traveling more, just all those sorts of things. I love being able to interact with people in the comments. So comment below, just whatever you feel like commenting. And you can also follow me over on Instagram. I will have it linked below. It's at Phylena Knits. I have recently started a new series where I am doing like a weekly mini blog where I share all of the things that I'm working on, and you kind of get to watch me knit and talk about projects and talk about the things that I'm doing on a little bit more of a regular basis, because filming and editing and doing all of that and getting it uploaded can is a lot more difficult than putting together just quick snippets of video for Instagram. So I have that over there. You'll also see sneak previews of finished objects and the progress of those different projects as I'm working on them. So if you feel inclined and you're on Instagram, you can absolutely go over to my page and see if it's one that you want to follow. Otherwise, I will talk to you all sooner rather than later, and I hope that everybody is doing well, and I can't wait to share more knitting with you soon. Okay, bye.